It started like most stories do, in silence. No thunder, no scream, just wind whispering through the skeletal trees of Black Hollow, a forgotten town carved into the cold hills of Pennsylvania. At its heart stood St. Agatha's Orphanage, a towering stone building that hadn't seen light since the Spanish flu. The townsfolk called it cursed, the government called it condemned, but none dared tear it down. Because every few decades someone would go missing, and the search would always lead here. In the autumn of 1926, the orphanage stirred again. The church, under quiet orders from the Vatican, reopened its rusted gates, placing 13 orphaned children in the care of 7 veiled nuns. The files said the children were war orphans, but the files lied. Locals whispered that one of the boys, Samuel Griggs, was no orphan, that his parents had tried to burn St. Agatha's to the ground and vanished. Inside the orphanage, the halls were lined with crucifixes, many inverted. Portraits of long-dead saints wept red wax. The chapel organ played at midnight with no hands. The older kids joked about a man in the basement wearing a nun's veil and feeding on sin. But for the new arrivals, everything just felt wrong. Sister Miriam, the head nun, never blinked. The bell tower chimed 13 times at noon, and every child was told the same rule: never ask what came before you. They weren't told who lived there before. They weren't told why only boys were admitted. They weren't told why the basement was always locked. But on the third night, Samuel snuck out of bed. He followed the humming, and what he found behind the chapel wall would crack open the truth behind St. Agatha's and unleash the Sin-Eater. The chapel stood frozen in candlelight, its cracked, stained glass windows filtering moonlight into broken halos. Samuel tiptoed through the pews, guided by a sound no child should ever follow, a soft, wet humming like lullabies sung underwater. Behind the altar, beneath a torn velvet curtain, was a hidden wooden panel, and behind that a stairwell spiraling down into darkness. He shouldn't have gone. But curiosity is its own kind of sin. The stairs groaned under his weight. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Walls bled with dampness. A single candle burned at the base of the stairwell, melted into a skull. Samuel's breath fogged. Something scraped behind the walls. Then he saw it. A room filled with masks, hundreds of them, all carved from bone. Some looked human, some didn't. In the center stood a table stained black, and beside it, a tall, silent figure dressed in robes too old to be cloth. Its face was wrapped in white linen, except for a red hole where the mouth should be. It didn't speak. It simply turned to Samuel and smiled with its mouth closed. Samuel didn't scream. He couldn't. The humming stopped. The creature placed something on the table, a rosary made of teeth, and in a voice like rotting wood it whispered, "Your sins taste of your father." Samuel turned and ran. He didn't sleep that night, didn't tell the others. But something had followed him back, something unseen, now watching from corners. By morning, Sister Miriam summoned him. "Curiosity," she said, her voice ice, "must be punished." Samuel was sent to the reflection room. No one ever returned the same. That day, the other boys noticed something chilling. Samuel's shadow no longer moved with him. The reflection room wasn't on any blueprint. The priests who once mapped St. Agatha's never acknowledged its existence, but every child knew of it. It was where naughty boys went to meet themselves. Samuel was led there by Sister Constance, a frail woman with glassy eyes and skin so pale it seemed dusted in flour. She never spoke, only hummed that same awful tune Samuel heard behind the chapel wall. The door was made of iron and sealed from the outside. Inside, the room was circular, lined with mirrors, tall, gold-framed, and fogged as if they breathed. There was no light source, yet everything glowed with a dim, sourceless illumination. The air was thick, heavy, and tasted faintly of copper. Sister Constance left him with 6 words: "Confess, or the mirror will do it." Then she locked him in. At first, Samuel saw only his reflection, pale, scared, tired. Then the lights flickered, and his reflection did not mimic him. It began to smile, to move when he stood still, to speak without sound. Then it began to bleed from the eyes. Samuel screamed. The mirrors cracked, but not from sound. Something behind the glass was pushing forward, trying to get out. Hands, mouths, familiar faces screaming silently. One looked like his mother. He covered his ears, but the voices spoke from inside his mind. You were born to feed it. You opened the door. You are your father's sin. The door burst open. Samuel ran out sobbing, barefoot, shaking, changed. The other children stepped away. His eyes were black around the edges now. His fingernails had turned grey, and from that night on, the mirrors in the boys' dormitory began to rattle on their own. Something had followed him back again, but this time, it was inside him. Not all the nuns at St. Agatha's were as pious as they appeared. Sister Agnes, quiet, elderly, eyes always cast downward, had a secret buried beneath decades of rosaries and whispered prayers. She had once been a child at the orphanage. She knew the truth. Late one stormy evening, after lights out, Samuel found her kneeling in the garden, digging furiously with her bare hands. Her nails were torn, her habit soaked. Mud clung to her like guilt. He watched in silence as she unearthed something, a rusted tin box sealed shut with wax and bone carvings. Before she could stop him, Samuel stepped forward. Is that yours, sister? She flinched, her eyes wide with panic, locked on his. You weren't supposed to see this. Inside the box were pages of a forbidden Bible, not printed, but handwritten in red ink. The margins were filled with notes in Latin and names. His name, other children's names, some crossed out. At the bottom was a charcoal drawing, a creature with a bloated belly and dozens of mouths. It wore a priest's collar. Sister Agnes snatched the book back. You need to forget this, she hissed, or it will find you again. Samuel asked, What is it? She answered only with a whisper. The Sin-Eater. It was never just a story. Before dawn, Sister Agnes vanished. They said she ran away, but the garden where she dug? By morning it had sunk several inches. The soil was churned, like something had clawed its way out. That night the bells rang by themselves. The other nuns refused to enter the chapel, and Samuel began to hear voices in his dreams again, voices speaking with Sister Agnes's tongue from inside the walls. It was tucked away in the restricted archives, a room sealed by Father Mallory himself and marked with a twisted crucifix scorched black. But late one night, Samuel, driven by whispers only he could hear, followed a trail of small, muddy footprints that led directly to the iron door. It was open. Inside, shelves buckled under the weight of forgotten files, dust-choked scrolls and broken relics. But what called to Samuel sat center stage beneath a single swaying bulb, a large, leather-bound book with no title. He opened it. The Orphan's Ledger. Each page listed a name, date of arrival, and something else. Offering status. Some were marked, unfit, returned. Others, absorbed. And then the word, fed. Samuel's name was there too. Next to it, pending, vessel development, in progress. His breath caught. The pages began to turn on their own, faster and faster, flipping back decades, revealing that this ritual went far beyond his generation. The orphanage had been offering children to something ancient, dark, and starving. In the margins, scrawled in desperate handwriting, only the impure are devoured, the pure are used. It feeds on memory, guilt, blood. The children don't leave, they become part of it. Suddenly, Samuel heard footsteps. Not nuns, not priests. Bare feet, slapping on stone. He hid behind a broken confessional booth as dozens of children entered the archive, pale, blinking, faces blank. Ghosts? No, echoes. They surrounded the ledger, whispering the same line. We were never adopted. We were eaten. As Samuel backed away, he bumped into someone. Father Mallory. Only now, his skin was cracking, and something, with too many eyes, moved just beneath it. The next day the sun refused to rise. Not figuratively, literally. A heavy, sulphurous fog swallowed St. Agatha's. No birdsong, no wind, just silence, and that endless, pulsing hum beneath the ground. The nuns gathered in the chapel for morning mass, but something was off. They didn't chant. They didn't kneel. They stared, blank-faced, motionless, at Father Mallory, who stood before the altar, arms stretched wide, as if inviting something in. Samuel watched from the upper balcony, heart pounding. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood Mary, the mute girl from the East Wing. She hadn't spoken in years, but now she whispered, "He's waking up." The floorboards beneath the altar began to rot and crack. The marble split, revealing an ancient pit, circular, lined with blackened teeth, not stone. From the depths came a sound, like a man choking on centuries of ash. And then, a hand. Bone white. Fingernails like obsidian blades. It crawled out, not fast, not slow, like it knew it had already won. Its body was a priest's robe stitched together with human faces. Its head, a sackcloth mask smeared with Eucharist wine, cut with a smile that bled. The Sin-Eater. It didn't walk. It floated, just an inch above the floor, dragging chains made from rosaries and infant bones. Mary pointed. "That's not a demon," she said. "That's God's mistake, and we are its apology." Suddenly the nuns turned in unison toward the balcony. Their mouths opened unnaturally wide, stretching, tearing. They screamed in Latin. Samuel and Mary ran, but behind them the chapel shook. The Sin-Eater had fully risen, and now it was hungry. Samuel and Mary stumbled through the hidden passages behind the chapel, passages no one talked about, passages that breathed. The walls were too warm, wet, covered in symbols that shimmered like dying stars, and beneath their feet, the boards pulsed like veins under skin. Mary whispered, "This isn't a basement. This is its stomach." Every few feet, they passed rooms sealed with iron crosses and thick rope. Inside they heard sobbing, giggling, sometimes chanting in children's voices. They didn't open any doors. Not after what they saw behind the first one. Inside room 3, a mirror, nothing else. But their reflections. They didn't move. They just stared back, grinning, bloody, and whispered in unison, "We remember you." Further down, they found a staircase spiraling into darkness. Carved into each step were names, all familiar, all dead. At the bottom was a chamber, a circular ritual room lit by hanging lanterns made from skulls. In the center, a baptismal font filled not with water, but melted candle wax, black feathers, and teeth. Above it hung a painting. The Sin-Eater in its true form. A thing too vast to fit into a canvas, serpent spine, human arms, nun's habit. Its face was stitched with the mouths of orphans. Mary touched the font and recoiled. "I was baptized here," she said, voice trembling. "They told us it was holy, but they lied." Suddenly, a rumble. The walls began to split, leaking blood. The smell of burning incense turned to rot. A voice whispered through the cracks. "You've seen what you shouldn't, and now you'll be fed." They ran again, but slower this time, because the air was thick and their legs felt less like theirs. They weren't escaping. They were being digested. The deeper Samuel and Mary went, the more reality crumbled. They emerged from the ritual chamber into an old, rotting nursery, but not one they'd ever seen before. The cribs were made of bones, the mobiles spun with finger bones tied to rosaries, and the lullaby, it came from nowhere, and it was sung in reverse. In the center of the room stood an altar, black marble, veined with gold and something redder. On it lay a book bound in human skin. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Mary opened it. Each page told the history of St. Agatha's real purpose, not to protect orphans, but to offer them. Every 7 years, 7 children were baptized not in holy water, but in a sacred mixture of ash, blood, and lamb fat. They were then marked, not with the cross, but with the more of grace, a sigil shaped like a screaming mouth. Those children vanished. The church called them runaways. But they never left. They were fed to the Sin-Eater, each soul consumed to prolong the life of the ancient nunhood who had made a covenant long ago. Samuel turned a page and saw something that froze him. A drawing of himself, dated 7 years ago, and beneath it, written in red, "He survived the last offering, a mistake to be corrected." Suddenly, the nursery shook. From the shadows came the sound of crawling, claws on stone, rasping breath that filled the room with sulfur. Mary screamed as the cribs toppled on their own, spilling out tiny robes. The floor cracked, a black tongue reached up from beneath. Samuel grabbed Mary's hand and yelled, "Run, now!" As they fled, the walls behind them bled a single phrase, "Blessed are the empty, for they shall be filled." They burst into a final corridor, one older than the orphanage itself. Its walls were carved from saltstone, veined with bone. The air was heavier here, not just humid, thick with the weight of ancient sins. At the end of the corridor stood a cathedral door 30 feet high, covered in symbols no human hand could have written. Mary, trembling, whispered, "This is where the first Sin-Eater was born." They pushed the doors open. Inside was a catacomb cathedral, lit by suspended lanterns filled with red oil, the kind that burns without flame. Along the pews sat the mummified remains of every missing orphan over a century. Their eyes were still wet, their mouths were open in silent screams. At the altar stood a throne of spines, and upon it, something inhuman yet familiar. It was Sister Therese. But her body had changed, now elongated. Her habit merged with flesh. Her face, hollowed into a smiling void. "Samuel," she crooned, "you always were the clever one, but cleverness won't feed him." The walls moaned. The Sin-Eater entered behind them, larger than before, now wearing the faces of the nuns who had once served it. It moved toward Samuel. Mary stepped forward. She was glowing. "You made a pact," she said to the thing, "but the debt was never finished." Then she pulled from her neck the rosary Samuel had found, the one that had once belonged to his mother. It shimmered with golden light. The Sin-Eater screeched, recoiling. The children's spirits began to rise from their seats, smoky, white, screaming. They surged toward the creature. Mary shouted, "Now Samuel, finish the offering." He stepped forward, rosary in hand, and drove it into his own chest. Samuel fell to his knees, the rosary buried in his chest, but instead of blood, light poured out, blinding, searing, pure. The Sin-Eater shrieked, not from pain, but starvation. It lunged for Samuel, but its form began to collapse, melting like wax under the holy fire radiating from the wound. All around them, the mummified children opened their eyes and smiled. Their spirits rose, pure, shimmering silhouettes no longer twisted by hunger or fear. They surrounded the Sin-Eater, whispering the names it had stolen. Every name was a blade, every whisper a wound. Sister Therese, what was left of her, crawled toward the throne, begging, "Please, I gave you everything. I was faithful." The Sin-Eater turned to her and devoured its last disciple. With a final roar, it imploded, sucked back into the altar, the stone cracking and splitting as though the earth itself was sealing away the evil for good. Silence. Then, Mary ran to Samuel. His eyes were glassy. He was fading. "You did it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I didn't save them," he murmured. "No," she smiled. "You freed them." Behind them, the spirits of the children gathered, nodding, grateful. And then, as one, they vanished into the light. Years later, St. Agatha's was shut down, condemned. Locals said no one dared enter again. But some say a girl still visits the garden, a girl in white, singing lullabies in Latin. They say she's waiting for someone. And inside the chapel, if you listen closely, you might hear a heartbeat beneath the floor, and sometimes, just sometimes, the candles light themselves. because the Sin-Eater is gone, but the hunger never truly dies.